All right, everybody, what's going on? It is Friday. You know what that means. We're going to do a full auto Friday. We're up to number 143. Let's just straight up get into it. All right, here we go.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Well, here we are. I hope your Friday's going well. I'm changing it up a little bit. I'm messing around with a little bit of a different camera setup today because why not, right? Sometimes I just feel like changing it up a bit. Trying it without the headphones on for a Friday episode. I'm still going to use this microphone, and I'm going to do a video actually for my personal YouTube page in a bit about podcasting and why I use the headphones and why particularly this microphone, because the audio is spectacular. And I'm going to kind of show some things that change the audio quality. Spinning off already onto a tangent for Friday. This has nothing to do with it, but I've been busy. And I've been doing some new stuff, and that's why I'm just kind of changing it up a bit. So I had this camera. I got this camera off of a recommendation. I've been doing a little bit of what I would call vlogging, a little bit behind the scenes. I'm going to do some videos, separate them from this podcast channel, because this podcast channel, I want it to be clean. I want it to be for podcasting only. And then I've been doing the change agents interviews as well. So 2 of them are already out. And let me tell you, these are some awesome conversations. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend that you do. They're much more condensed in the duration at the very least. The conversations aren't actually always as short, but with the professional editing and production team behind the scenes, what it allows them to do is actually condense it down to the most impactful portions. So 2 of them are out. Another one's coming out next Monday. I think we have at this point 13 in the can. And we've talked about some really cool stuff, from a different look at policing with LAPD to the LA Innocence Project, and talking about the number of innocent people that have been incarcerated, clean water, obviously cobalt and human trafficking, veterans transitioning out of the military, handicap support for people in war zones, and the list just goes on and on. They've been fascinating conversations. And this week coming up, I think I'm doing 6 or 7 more. So there'll be a total of 25 that will come out in the first season. And yeah, I hope you really enjoy it, because I've enjoyed doing it. And I don't know if it'll go to a season 2. If it does, awesome. If it doesn't, well, who knows? I'm still going to do what I do, because I actually have gotten that question quite a bit. Am I going to stop doing this podcast? And of course not. I really love doing this podcast. Probably one of my favorite things that I do. But let's get into the questions for today, because I feel like that's what you're all here for. And I'll ramble on for hours if I don't. So I have 4 picked out. We'll see how far I get into this. I was listening to your question from the guy with the gun on the trailer, and I thought of this question. I've heard you and others like Glover and some of your former coworkers talking about the advantage of being in special operations is that you were most often on the offensive, whereas more conventional units were often waiting to react to being attacked. So in my mind, that translates to a civilian potential for violence. We are reactionary to most violent situations. For reference, I am not combat experienced, and my schooling is a couple of fieldcraft classes and 1 sheepdog response class and a 2 long-time blue belt in BJJ. What would you say an untested individual should be doing to move into a better space for reaction to violence? Are there metrics you could suggest for aiming as a starting line? Thanks for all that you do, and cheers. At a broad level, I think that, to use your words, what should an untested individual do, or what should they be doing to move into a better space for reaction to violence? You're already doing it. You are seeking out additional training. You have gone to some of Glover's courses, and in that, I know for a fact he's talking about mindset, and then, of course, competence with a firearm itself, pistol, rifle, a variety of levels. So it could be an intro level or it could be an advanced level, but continuing to go and pursue that knowledge is exactly what I would recommend that somebody would do. You're already participating in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which, as everybody who listens to this podcast knows, I absolutely love, but I also don't think it's magic. I don't think it's the end-all be-all, and I don't think that there is an end-all be-all. I think when it comes to violence, for me, the best way to talk about it is in terms of range. Long range, medium range, up close and in your face, and somebody actually touching you. I hope that nobody experiences violence in their life. And from a mathematical perspective, the statistics are on your side. You're very unlikely to actually encounter violence. Again, from a mathematical perspective, it's the safest time for human beings to ever be alive. And stats totally don't matter once you find yourself in that situation. So I think it's just more of like a good way to ground yourself into the likelihood, but it shouldn't be ignored because you never know where you're going to actually find yourself. I just don't want people walking around paranoid, I guess would be what I'm trying to say. So view it in perspective of ranges. And what you said, we are reactionary to most violent situations for civilians. I hope so. I hope that people aren't walking around every day looking for a reason to be violent. That's not what I want. There are people who are out there like that. And when you encounter one of them, whether they are skilled or not, it's the reaction to that violent situation that's actually probably going to make the difference. But for people like yourself who are already looking at this, whether you realize it or not, from that perspective of ranges, because you got firearms, which will give you some distance, and then what happens if somebody actually puts their hands on you, I think you're actually really well positioned right now, way better than most people who don't think about it from those perspectives or don't think about it at all, probably. And then they find themselves in a situation and they're in a fight or flight feeling inside of their body for the first time, and it can get a little Western. People have every right to choose to live their life however they want to, be prepared or don't be prepared. Just understand that the choices that you make are going to directly inform the outcome in a situation like this, and you'll have nobody to point the finger at and blame but yourself if it doesn't go the way that you want it to, if you haven't done anything to prepare. You could prepare all you want. You could be the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt on planet Earth, and you might encounter 6 people, and you're going to be proper fucked if that happens, if you don't have the ability to create space and get out of there. So, it's there's a little bit of luck involved, but vast majority of it is going to fall on the person that you see in the mirror when it comes to the outcome of these situations. I don't really have any good metrics to suggest because there's such a varying degree of availability and access to firearms training and courses, and any particular skill set that you would want to go after when it comes to like a hands-on distance. So instead of laying out metrics, what I would just put out there is what I already have. Think about this from the perspective of ranges and objectively look at yourself and say, hey, what am I doing to protect myself, or prepare myself, I should say, along these ranges? And if I'm not doing anything, maybe that's the only metric that actually matters. 0 is the number that you want to avoid. You're not doing anything to prepare yourself. I would say you have nothing but room for improvement in front of you. But for somebody like you who has already gone down this rabbit hole a little bit, keep doing the things that you're doing. And if you find something that you like more than another one, don't be afraid to explore that to a very deep degree. Maybe jiu-jitsu leads you to kickboxing. Fucking awesome. Go do kickboxing. Kick the living shit out of somebody's head in a training environment. I'm not saying go out and do that in the subway because that's horrendous. But I actually don't worry about people as much who take the time to really practice fighting and whatever that may look like, because they come to the realization that fighting hurts. And even if you win, it still can really suck. So they avoid violence as much as possible. It's interesting. The people I know who are the most capable of violence are the least likely to be violent. And that's a good thing. So keep doing what you're doing. And for people out there who don't know what to do, use what this individual has done as an example. If you don't feel comfortable with firearms, which I understand and respect people's beliefs and feelings, what I would say is still be a value add. So if you don't want to train in that world, my recommendation would be to you is, if you want to be prepared, focus that on medical training. Be able to help and be a value add if you find yourself in a situation where somebody else may need it. You might be rolling up on the aftermath of something, and that ability to provide a slightly higher level of care until medical professionals get there can be the difference between life and death for people. And it's a great skill to have. And it also detaches you from that requirement for somebody else to always be there and help you. You'll be able to do that and help others. So, food for thought. Question number 2. As a non-military /LEO, I love the show and what you are doing with Change Agents. Thank you. I love it as well, as I talked about in the beginning. Here's my question. With the recent Nashville school shooting, the body cam footage was released of the full incident. This was rapidly spread over the internet, and I am not diminishing what the officers did and applaud their service and actions. My issue is with what seems to be the glorification of the body cam footage on the internet. Many public figures have shared the footage and are thanking the officers for their ability to handle the threat, unlike Uvalde. My issue is with what seems to be mass glorification of the footage, and is this sending the wrong message? It seems as if the true tragedy of the shooting is being lost in the mix of the gender of the shooter and the actions of the police officers, which should not go unnoticed. Is there a good balance of celebrating the officers while still keeping the main focus on the tragedy? Hope to hear your thoughts. Whew. It's a short email, but it's a super deep question. I'm going to start by saying this. There, in my opinion, which everything that comes out of my mouth is clearly that. And it is, I get my opinion, or my opinion is derived from the experiences that I have had in my life. And that's how I view the world, as we all do, through the lens of the things that we have experienced and worked our way through in our own life. I want there to be 0 school shootings. Just like, that sucks that you have to even lay that foundation. But I actually don't want anybody at any time to be the recipient of violence in their life. That is my pie in the sky. That's what I would love for everybody. Do I 100% recognize that that's a pipe dream? Yes, I do. But that's what I would like it to be. I would like 0 children to ever think about the risk of any type of gun-related violence or violence in general when they go to school. I wish that is the world that we live in. That isn't the world that we live in. I do not believe that our state and federal government can solve the issue of school shooting. I do not believe that there is any legislation or gun law that can be or would be enacted that will stop school shootings. I believe the issue to be much more deeply rooted in our society and what we have become willing to tolerate, the example that we are setting for children, the examples that we are setting in our communities and in our families. Until we address those issues, everything else is window dressing. And the talk of we should take this or we should write this, all of that is actions, or they are, in my mind, attempts at a perceived action. And I actually think that most of the people presenting them realize that they won't have an impact, but they want to appear as if what they are doing will make a difference and that they care very deeply. I do believe that they care very deeply, but I also believe that at a deep level, they realize what it is they're recommending is not going to actually solve the problem. And that's a tough place to be. I don't think there is a binary solution to solving school shootings. It's easy to look at the weapons that are used in those shootings. But the weapon that is used in the shooting is not the root cause of why the shooting occurred. And until we focus time, energy, effort, money, resources into figuring that out, I don't think there's anything that can be done to stop them. I personally believe that it is going to be a generational solution that is going to take time, and that solution is going to come from a focus, a deep focus on values and beliefs. And I notice, please, that I didn't say my values and beliefs. I think the first step is we need to determine who the fuck we want to be, who we are and what we stand for. Now, the beauty in this country is that we have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom of religious expression. We have the freedom to be who we want to be. And that is not a choice that many have in this world. And I'm very grateful of that. So when I say we need to figure out who the fuck we want to be, I don't expect there to be a consensus. I actually think it's a very good thing that there is not a consensus. But there are, in my mind at least, so many societal issues that are rooted in, how do I say this? I'm just going to say it. People outsourcing their parenting and family values to others or a fucking cell phone, and allowing the influence that should be coming from parents to come from social circles or individuals that our children now have access to via their devices unrestricted. Do I think it's completely based on that? No, I absolutely don't. But the more that things like this happen, the more it is trending me in that direction. Because what we're doing right now is not solving the problem. I think we could all agree on that. It is not solving the problem. So let's look at what we're not doing. And what I see, again, from my experience, from what I am seeing and listening to with my own eyes and ears, it's not a focus on those core values. And until we start focusing on those things, like I said, I think the rest of it is kind of window dressing. Now, to the question, how do we even talk about school shootings, what led up to them, the shooter, the weapon that was used, and the law enforcement response without glorifying any aspect of that? I don't have a good answer. Because each of those are valid areas of discussion. I've heard people say that when there is a school shooting or a mass shooting of any kind, that the media shouldn't cover it at all. And I don't know if that's the right answer, because awareness of something happening can spawn interest and change down the road. I've heard the people saying, that the shooter itself, the person should never be named and they should never have any level of notoriety. I kind of agree. I can agree with that, because I feel like some people take these actions or do these acts because that is what they are looking for. And I don't understand the logical headspace to get there. Like, oh, I know the solution to this. I'm going to go to school and kill innocent children because then people will know my name. I don't understand that at all. But I do understand the argument that when these people, they're not that they're celebrated, but when they are talked about, that it can, in fact, lead to people trying to repeat their behavior so that the same level of notoriety is brought to them. Okay, so I could understand that area of discussion. The weapon used, there's a lot of people who immediately want to politicize a weapon used in a mass shooting. And my stance on weapons is like, let's talk about them. Let's have a discussion about the weapons. And I'm not saying about the Second Amendment. Like, we can talk about the weapons. Let's talk about the weapons that are used in these situations, but let's also talk about the weapons that are used to end these situations. Because for every mass shooting incident or violent action with a weapon in society, they're generally ended with another one as well. So it's not necessarily about the tool, it's about the individual wielding that tool. But let's leave weapons on the table to at least discuss. The amount of information that I have personally heard about what people think about weapons and guns that is so wildly inaccurate shocks me to a degree. And it opens my eyes to how much misinformation or disinformation or even just lack of knowledge there is around firearms. Keep it on the table. Let's talk about it. I literally had somebody tell me yesterday, I'm going to try to remember the exact words, that when you are shot with an AK-47, it obliterates you. You will not be recognizable. And I stood in front of this person and I said to them, I was shot with an AK-47 and I was not obliterated. So if that's what you believe, how is it possible that I am standing here in front of you right now, recognizable and totally able to function? There wasn't a logical answer that was received in my direction. It was a very emotional one, and I get it. Be as emotional as you want to, but there is a huge opportunity to actually educate people about what weapons are and what they can do and what they can't do for clarity. Without that education, it is far too easy to manipulate people and make them fearful. When you make somebody fearful, they become very malleable, and then you can become pushed in any particular direction that an individual and organization would want to push you in. So let's leave that on the table. Now, the body cam footage. Is it possible that the footage could be overused and glorified? Yeah, I would say that it could be. I received the footage myself. I saw the footage, and I am incredibly proud of the actions that the officers took. They ran towards the sound of gunfire. They moved as quickly as they could to identify and neutralize the threat. That is exactly what I think people want to see from law enforcement. And I hope it is not lost on people how fucking hard it is to do what they did. To know that you are at risk, to go into an unknown situation, accepting that risk for the benefit of others. Does the display of that footage hopefully help highlight that? I hope so. But I also think it can be overdone. I don't know where the balance is. Personally, like my flash reaction to mass shootings, and if I was only able to be able to put out one piece of information about every mass shooter, my gut reaction is you show the fucking picture of the person dead and you say, this is what happens if you take those actions. But that's also not fair because it's an incomplete picture as well. I don't want the officers' reactions to be glorified, much like I don't want the shooter's reactions to be glorified or a weapon to be glorified. I don't know the right or wrong way to talk about this. I do want to highlight success, but I also want to highlight failure as well. It's a balancing act. It's a matter more to me of transparency and showing, Uvalde wasn't there, don't know anybody that was there, have never been a law enforcement officer in my life, right? Take it with a grain of salt. Uvalde was a fucking catastrophic failure in my mind and in pretty much every law enforcement officer that I have talked to. But it's also not the norm. It received so much attention and press, and it should. The lens and optic of transparency of what happened, but more importantly, why, needs to be on that situation. But if that's the only story that we tell, it paints an incorrect picture of law enforcement, and it paints an incredibly negative picture of people who operate in that world. So it has to be balanced with things who are living up to every inch of what we would hope and want them to be, which is exactly what I see the body cam footage to be, like I already described it. Individuals running towards the sound of the guns. But there's got to be a balance. I don't know where that balance is. All information has value. Not all information is important. And that should be remembered as well. We should highlight these things to the point of their value, but not highlight them too much that they no longer become important. And I know I'm not answering the question, but I don't know if this question has a precise answer. The answer, again, I think falls into what I've already said, balance, and trying to figure out a way to balance it. Yeah, it's a tough one. This is one that if there are things that I can't sleep at night that I'll end up, my mind will drift to situations like this and to whether or not they even have a solution. That's what I spend my time thinking about it. It's not fun. It's not awesome. Because I can't think of and can't find my way towards concrete steps that I think would make a huge difference. I'd rather have the officer's behavior in this instance glorified than the shooter's. Or actually in every instance, I should say. I would rather have the responding individual's behavior glorified than that of the one who is there to create havoc and murder others. And I guess that's where I land. And as far as it being over-glorified, yeah, I think it's possible. But if I had to choose one side of that to land on, I would land on people viewing that heroic behavior perhaps a little bit too much, as opposed to not viewing it enough. And that's where I land on that. And again, I'm not even sure I actually answered that fucking question. I did the best that I could. Question number 3. Back to my wheelhouse. Relationships. I've been in a relationship with my girlfriend for over 4 years now, and I'm this part of the sentence, I'm bad books at the moment holding on to a book. I don't know if that was a typo, but I feel like you're saying I'm in a bad situation at the moment and I'm holding on to a book. The book in question is 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. My girlfriend stated she hates Jordan Peterson and she hates that I have a book of his. I'd moved the book from my bookshelf and into a Pelican case. I keep work equipment. I'm in law enforcement. And after she stated her displeasure. So you move the book out of sight after she stated her displeasure. This afternoon, she questioned what was in the case. So in the interest of transparency, I opened it up and the book is sitting there. We had an argument over the book, and in order to keep the peace, I threw the book in the recycling bin. She also hates that I have a half-face blade that I bought myself as a reward for graduating my FTO program, which I believe stands for Field Training Officer. Is it wrong to just bend to pressure like that? Or does the phrase happy wife, happy life ring true here? I love your thoughts. Fuck. Why people send me relationship questions, I still am baffled to this day. But here we go. Here's what I think. I'm going to dive back into some words that you used. In the interest of transparency, I opened up the book, or I opened it up and the book was sitting there. If you were actually being transparent, you wouldn't have hidden the book in a case, right? Like, and again, this might be nitpicking a little bit, but like, let's get down to the brass tacks here. So you knew it was an issue, and if you were really being transparent, you would have said to her, hey, like, I know that this book bothers you. I don't want to get rid of it, so I'm going to keep it in this case so you don't have to see it. But you didn't do that. You just moved it, and then she caught you still having it. So let's just call it for what it is. And I'm not saying it's a negative, but let's be precise and accurate with our language. So does the phrase happy wife, happy life ring true here? And I would add to that, ever. Always. You know, there's a couple ways to phrase it, but it's more than just this particular situation. Does having a happy wife make your life better? In my experience, yes. But what if, in order to make your wife happy, you are not being the person that you really want to be? Does that mean that your life is happy because she is, even though you know every second of every day you're not being the person that you want to be? When you get to your deathbed, are you going to have regret, or are you going to be thankful that you didn't become or act as if the person that you wanted to be so you could make somebody else happy? I don't have the answer to that question, but I think it's an important one to take a look at. So yes, having a happy wife will make your life better, in my personal experience. But will make your life even better than that is you yourself being honest with yourself, and then in turn being honest with your significant other about what makes you happy, excuse me, and then determining whether or not you can live and grow together, or whether or not it would be better for both of your happiness and health to move apart from each other. That's a much more important question. In this particular situation, what I would say is, why does she dislike Jordan Peterson? And why does she dislike half-face blades? I don't think either of those things should be a relationship-ending issue if you cannot come to an agreement upon it. But if she is not willing to live with the fact that you may have disagreements on certain issues, and her happiness is only going to be based around you changing who you are and getting rid of things that bother her, in my experience, from what I have seen, in the end, that's not going to work out well, for what I have already described earlier about, you know, your life and happiness and health, and her life and happiness and health. There are, of course, times in a relationship where you are going to be asked to do things or be a part of things that you don't fucking want to do. And I'll be the first to tell you that when I'm approached with those things, you are damn right. If it's not what I consider to be a major issue, going with the flow, to make sure that your significant other is happy, by all means, right? I do not think that life should be filled with like argument and contention. God, that would be miserable. But also, like, why are you sharing your life with somebody who you're spending your time arguing and being contentious with? Like, maybe find a better partner. There's a lot of fish in the sea. 50%. I don't think that stat's right. But point is, like, if you find yourself in a place where it's always argumentative and always contentious, like, you might have bigger issues going on. Your wife has to determine who she is and what makes her happy. You have to determine who you are and what makes you happy. And then the question is, like I said, can you live and grow together into the future? Can you be parallel, or do you guys have to go in separate directions? I don't think it's a good sign that you are willing to give up on your beliefs just to make somebody else happy. And I say that because it's a trend that will continue. It's not like, oh, okay, I'll just give up on these two, or I'll acquiesce on these two, and that will be the end of it. Because that's just not the way that it works. If you have a history of that particular behavior, whatever the behavior may be, more than likely it's going to continue. And once somebody else recognizes that, they will continue to push on that. And they will expect you to have the same level of reaction that you did previously. That's not a fault on you, and that's not a fault on them. That's just kind of the way human interactions work. I have so many questions. Like, what are the arguments over the book? What are the arguments over the half-face blade knife? Have you taken the time to explain what they mean to you, the value that you derive from it? I have books that I don't agree with at all, but I still have them because I'm interested in understanding how other people think and feel. If you don't take that time to explore the counter argument or the counter belief to the one that you have, it's going to be really difficult when you encounter somebody that has those alternate beliefs to understand where they're coming from. And again, I'm not saying you have to agree, but I think trying to see the world through at least a small fraction of a percentage of how somebody else sees it is so helpful in communication and relationships. You don't have to agree with them, but ask yourself, why do they see the world in the way that they do? And so because you brought up a book, like, I will buy books on a topic that I'm interested in, or one that I want to learn something about, but from both sides, antagonist and protagonist. So not always, by the way. I have limited time just like everybody else does. But on issues of, like, to go back to the question about, it wasn't really about gun control, but we were talking about guns. I 100% realize that I'm biased when it comes to my perception of weapons, because I was like a carpenter, and it was like a hammer hanging off my belt. It was a tool, straight up a tool. But I realized that almost nobody has that experience. So if I try to overlay my thoughts on everything because of my experience that almost nobody else shares, it's going to fall flat. And it should fall flat because they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. They don't have the experience that I have. So I try to think about, how does somebody arrive at the opinion or belief that they have? And when people are willing to engage with me in conversation, I ask questions about what led them to their belief. Sometimes people don't want to answer them because they think that you're trying to find a way to mudsuck them, or come around and ambush them with some piece of information that you give them. I ask it from the perspective of genuinely being curious and interested, because those experiences inform their opinions and beliefs. Just like here, with what is it that the 12 Rules of Life by Jordan Peterson, a book that I do have, and I'm about halfway through it. This is one where I actually started on audio, and then the amount of content that is produced daily, I lost the ability to keep track of it, so I fell behind, and then I read a few chapters. I find Jordan Peterson to be a very interesting human being. Do I agree with everything that he says? Absolutely not. But am I fascinated and deeply believe with some of the things that he does say? I absolutely do. One of the things that I love about one of the statements that he has made was actually about violence, about how he thinks that men should be incredibly capable of violence, but they should have it under control. I couldn't agree with that more. And I addressed that when it came to the range issues, long distance, medium, and somebody putting their hands on you. But maybe have a conversation. This is where I would start. Here's the advice that I would give you. First off, the happy wife, happy life is a good bumper sticker. I think it fails in reality as it comes to the happiness of both parties in that equation. If you want to live your life like that, that's your choice. I'm not saying don't do that, but understand that if you're going to live your life by that bumper sticker, you might have some very deep and resentful and regretful thoughts at the tail end of your own life. But if you choose to, go ahead. Have questions. Have conversations. I would try to develop a deeper understanding of what it is that she doesn't like about that book and the Half-Faced Blades knife. And again, that will be an illuminating conversation for the both of you because it's going to explore and expose where your differences are. And when people have differences, they can either build a bridge to work with them or realize that the bridge cannot be built and you need to go in separate directions. So I would actually dive into this a little bit more. That would be my advice. I hear people say sometimes like, well, I just did it this time and I'm going to wait a little bit and we'll come back to it later. In my experience, waiting is not necessarily a guarantee of a better outcome in the long run. Actually, more often than not, it's going to be a worse outcome in the long run because things that are unsaid, they fester quite a bit. Not for everybody, but that has been my experience. So I would actually address this immediately and use it as an opportunity, again, to define and explore the differences that you may have. You need to be an advocate for what yourself, what you believe, and why you believe the things that you do. And you also need to be willing to listen to what she believes and why. Maybe she's worried that like you're going to try to become the next Jordan Peterson. And maybe you got the book because you've heard him say some interesting things in the past, but you could let her know like, hey, just so you know, I don't agree with everything in this book. I was more interested in the person and his beliefs. That doesn't necessarily mean that I am going to espouse them or try to live those beliefs, but I'm just trying to further educate myself. If you want to throw the book away, then I would say do so. But if you don't, and you feel like you're not being yourself, instead of running away from this issue, I would do a 180 and I would go directly at it. And that's the best advice that I have. Check how long I've been running my mouth. I always lose track. I'm already at almost 40 minutes. So I'm going to shut up. I'll see you guys on Monday with another episode. You guys have a good one.